Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is hautemesstom. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are new here, I am currently on a 6-month no-buy that I started at the beginning of July. If you would like more information about that, I will link that in the cards in the top corner, one of them. Can't remember which one. Don't know why. I can't figure that out. I swear I'm a smart person. Also, before we get started with the content of this video, I have been nominated for Best of Pittsburgh, so Best YouTuber, and also my podcast, It Bears Repeating, has been nominated for Best Podcast of Pittsburgh. I have all that information linked in my description info down below. So if I'd be very kind of you if you went to go vote for me. I'd very much appreciate it. Okay, let's get started with the video. Let me preface this with, I am a Pat McGrath collector. I have not all of the releases, but a lot of the releases. There are some things that I haven't been quite as interested, but overall, Pat McGrath as a brand is something that I have found myself in the past to be super attracted to. And I own all 8 of the Mothership palettes that have been released up until this point. And I just started this no-buy in July, and since July, obviously, Pat McGrath hasn't released much because she just released her blushes in June. So in my head, I was like, this is going to be the first big test of my will. I do feel like I have a slight spending problem when it comes to makeup, which is why I'm on this no-buy. I also have found myself, since I started the no-buy, being way more critical about what I consider bringing into my collection or what I might bring into my collection in the future. As of right now, I'm just trying to love my collection as it is and work my way through some stuff before I allow myself to buy anything new. And I also want to get stuff out of my collection if I don't enjoy it and I haven't given myself enough time with the item to know that I don't enjoy it. So I'm just being very picky, very picky. So Pat McGrath was teasing Utopia. We knew what it was called before we got to see it, and in my head I was like, oh no, it's gonna be so pretty, it's gonna be it's gonna be beautiful, and I'm not gonna be able to resist, and I'm gonna end up buying it. Then it was released, the colors, what it looked like on the inside. So I'm going to put that up on the screen for you just so you can see it in case you haven't already. So with the word Huetopia, you hear the word hue. When you think of hue, you think of color. Now, Pat McGrath in the past has been kind of a big proponent of color and has done a lot of very cool electric, glittery, fun colors, both in her single eyeshadow collection and in her palettes. And I had been complaining relatively recently about Pat McGrath's Motherships because I felt like the last 2 were a bit uninspired. We kept doing this Divine Rose, and even in the mini collections that were released after, in between Divine Rose 1 and 2, it was all just very pink heavy. And I know that some people very much love the color pink, but and I do as well, but it just was why do I want one and then another pink palette? And again, the palettes are different, and I do like one more than the other. But it was just where are we taking the brand? Why is it looking like this? Because to me, Pat McGrath, when she first launched her brand, was really making makeup for makeup lovers. So people like me who enjoy wearing color, but want to do it I'm not gonna say but want to do it next level. There wasn't anything really basic about what she was releasing. It was just all felt very well thought out and curated, and especially when she was doing the limited edition drops of things. So the Skin Fetish before it became part of the permanent line, the gold, the metallic pigments that came out, the Metamorphosis, I think is what it was called. The glitter lips, which is something that has now come and gone out of fashion because, a lot of people are being more concerned about the kinds of products that they're using. Do we really need to be using glitter? Glitter is plastic, etc., etc. Biodegradable glitter is kind of what we are trying to push for. So I'm nervous about the new Mothership because I think I'm going to end up buying it. Not really inspired by what I see, because I know Pat McGrath has the capability of releasing something far more intriguing. And what's happening is that I think she saw success with Divine Rose and 1 and 2 that she did not see with her previous Mothership palettes, because the Mothership palettes are an investment. They're $125. You're only going to buy it if you think you're going to use it a lot, unless you're a collector like me or a makeup lover who just likes to have things no matter what the brand. And I think that Pat McGrath kind of hit the nail on the head with Divine Rose 1 in something that was both Pat McGrath, but also something that everyday wearers would be interested in at least trying and be willing to spend $125 for. Because when you think about Natasha Denona, people really got excited about the Sunset palette. And what's great about the Sunset palette, and what I think made it very sellable and people were willing to spend $129 for it, they're like, oh, there are a lot of browns and neutrals in here that are going to, I can wear every day, even if I'm not using the yellow or the red or these, there was a little bit of like a duochrome finish to a lot of those shadows. So it could be an everyday wearer's dream, and it could also be a makeup lover's dream. So I think that, like Natasha Denona with the Sunset palette, Divine Rose 1 really kind of like set Pat McGrath up for success, and people who maybe weren't willing to spend $125 on one of her palettes had finally like tried it. And then with the Divine Rose 2, which kind of like stepped the game up and like made it a little bit more interesting than Divine Rose 1, people who already liked Divine Rose 1 now knew what the quality of Pat McGrath eyeshadows were and whether or not they liked them. So I think a lot of people bought the second one, especially because of the one shade Sextra Terrestrial, which was the multi-chrome that did appear in Divine Rose 2. So now I think that Pat realizes that like if she can sell to the everyday wearer, she's going to make more money, which makes sense. And I understand that as someone who is like, you're a business and you want to make money. However, you are like now leaving me astray, a fan, and I'm wondering if other people who collect Pat McGrath or really liked Pat McGrath because they felt like it was innovative at first and now it's kind of like losing the luster, are feeling the same way as me, because this palette is just all like neutral warming golds, and then it has like that beautiful shifty purple. Now I'm not saying that this palette is ugly by any means, but I do think that it should be taken into consideration like what this could look like, what could have made this better. Editing Tom here. Lauren Mae Beauty actually did put together a palette inspired by Utopia and wanted to make it more what she felt like Utopia was. So I'm going to link her video in the cards and in the description below so you can see what she did, just because I think she and I are kind of on the same level when we heard Utopia and then we saw the palette that we did, and I think she did a really good job kind of taking it to the next level. Maybe it should have been called something else because the packaging is beautiful on the like the outer cardboard packaging. I used to be very sentimental about the cardboard packaging, but I did throw it all away. It was just like taking up space. It wasn't using it, and I think the palettes are very beautiful without the packaging. But like, let's do a little bit of a retrospective on Pat McGrath's palettes and then like kind of talk about what I mean. So I have the first three set aside here. So you may not remember, but Pat McGrath launched her brand whenever it became not just the Labs, which was releasing the individual little kits. She launched 3 of the Mothership palettes, and this is Mothership 1. And so unlike a lot of things on the market at the time, this is a cool toned palette. They are all blue or have blue undertones in it, so it does lean more cool. And so you have like what you could do incredible smoky eyes with these grays over here, and then you have this pop of this blue, this like yellow, cool yellow pigment up here. I don't really care for that color that much. I don't dig into it a lot. And then you have this duochrome, which goes from pink to blue, and then you have this beautiful astral pigment. These are very, very pretty, and it just says there's nothing like this because this was around the time that modern Renaissance was kind of ruling the world, and it has that very like electric blue, just like it's shocking, and there was just nothing else like it. And this, I think looking at this color story, you're like, oh, I could really either push the boundaries or just do something very simple and cool toned, which is like the beauty of it, because it does kind of have both sides, but like the impact that these shades have up here, these like really just take it to the next level. And all 3 of the original launches feel more special, right? Because of it. This is the Mothership 2, and so it is different. When you look at these neutral shades down here, again, there is a repeat shade with the black, but there's a dark brown, and these ones they're not warm, but I would say they're more just like, it's just straight up neutral. And then you have this duochrome green to purple, and then you have this shifty pink to gold, and then you have a regular gold pigment. Again, Pat McGrath, this is a repeat offender too. They're not all the same shade of gold whenever she does a gold in a palette. However, gold appears a lot in her palettes, and you're just kind of like, do I need a gold pigment in every palette? It's like the same conversation people are having about the Wayne Goss palettes, where it was like, do we really need a black in every single one of Wayne Goss's palettes? Something feels very special about this. Again, I get the numbers wrong sometimes, so I do apologize. And they're not really clearly labeled. Again, has a black, which is like kind of unnecessary even in your first three, but these are very dramatic palettes. And then you have like a beautiful purple and these shimmers. And I do like this part of the palette, but again, this part up here is really where it's at. So then you have this yellow gold and then this blue duochrome. And we like did not see duochromes like this before. And these pigments up here, like they almost have a bit of texture to them, which like a lot of things like weren't seeing it at the time. Again, this feels very special and like something very unique that like you're not really gonna find with other brands. Then the next launch, this was limited edition, but now seems to be permanent. This is the Mothership IV, and these are all shimmers. So again, she didn't have anything like this before, but then you see the gold, right? And then we're gonna keep seeing gold because I told you that's what we see. But these shimmers are very pretty, but these are just actually shimmers. None of them are that incredible pigment that appears on the right four of every other Mothership palette. So while this is very different, it's like unlike all of the other Motherships, it's a little bit of an outlier when you're thinking about like color stories, because this was clearly made to be a companion palette, although Pat McGrath does show you a bunch of looks you can do with just this palette. And then this was the Mothership V, and this has actually always been my favorite Mothership. Like I am working on a series where I'm like ranking these and like kind of telling you why, but this one always kind of was my favorite because there was like no true gold in it. Like you have this like gold white here, but all of the pigments in here just have a different impact than the others. Like this blue is very interesting. It's like a periwinkle on the eye, and then this bronze shade right here is one of my favorite shades that Pat has ever done. And then you got these warmer tones over here, but then you also have like coolness. It's like a very interesting palette. It's maybe not the easiest color story that Pat's ever released, but I think that's what makes it special. Again, this palette feels special and feels like worth my time and was worth my money. Again, unlike any other palette, she released this one, and it is the Mothership. I got those confused. I just showed you 6. This is the Mothership V, Bronze Seduction. Again, this one's like very clearly a warm tone palette, but it doesn't look like other warm tone palettes on the market. It's like red, ruddy. And a lot of like the warm tone palettes you were seeing had like warm pinks, and there would be a little bit of ruddiness to this, but like nothing with like a straight up red like this. And then you have this beautiful contrasting complementary green, and then another multi-chrome up here. It's just, and then these bronzy, it's just so good. This beautiful aubergine color over here, like all of these, just like this is just like a next level warm palette. I really like this. I think this is one of the ones that people really started paying attention to the Mothership palette. She released the Divine Rose 1. Now let's like take a look at this. How boring does this look compared to all of the other ones that I just showed you? It's brown. There's not a lot of intrigue. And even in the special shades, which are the ones that are over here, these are like the pigments instead of being like eyeshadows. There's not much diversity here. Again, you have a gold. I really am fond of this color up here. I think it's very pretty. But when I open this up, it's like, okay, so we're doing that eye today. Like to me, there's only like one real eyeshadow look that you can get out of this palette. Sorry, I'm looking in my monitor just to make sure like I'm making sure colors pick up okay when I'm talking about them. But this is just like, oh, we're gonna do like a brown smoky guy with like a very pretty shimmer. And that's all. And I think that that is a lot of people who wear makeup, that's the kind of eye look they want to do every day. So this is going to be a great palette for them. But again, all of the other things, there were some challenges to the color stories, and like made you kind of be a little more thoughtful about what you're putting on the eye. And I realize that that's not everyone's long game when they're looking at an eyeshadow palette, but I do think as someone who's like very interested in makeup, that's far more interesting to me to like look at an eyeshadow palette and go, I see I could do so much with this, but also like I have to be very particular about what I do. Whereas this one, it's like you kind of throw anything anywhere on this palette on your face and you're just going to be like, yeah, that's it. That's really what I want. So it's just like, this was like so boring to me. But again, I think that this was the palette that everyone, like people loved this because of that nature of it, that it was very simple and kind of anything you put on your eye was going to look very good without being too challenging. And then the Divine Rose 2 came out, which is definitely far more interesting than the one I just showed you, but it is just kind of the same, but like stepped up. Again, you got more golds, which is like, who needs more golds, especially if you own all the other Mothership palettes. And then of course this shade right here it's really hard to, there you go. There's like, you can see it's green whenever you shift it into some angles. Maybe it's better, there you go. And it has like a very cool multi-chrome situation happening there. But again, very beautiful, and I really do love this pink. And again, and this one I think is also stuff, like you could use these as blushes. It's a little more face friendly. You can kind of do more things all over your face with this palette, but maybe the other ones don't allow you to. But again, while this is very pretty, like again, I feel like you're kind of getting the same look every time. But when I reach for this palette, I am reaching because I want to use this pink shade, or I want to use this multi-chrome, but no other reason am I really picking this up. So it's like, it used to be like, I want to use the whole palette, and then it kind of worked its way down to being like, I like 1 or 2 shades, which is what has happened with this Utopia palette, where it's like, I really want that purple shade. Unfortunately for Pat McGrath, I can get that purple shade somewhere else without buying the whole Mothership. Whereas if we just looked at all the Motherships I own, a lot of the colors in this Utopian palette have, even though they're not the same color, very similar shades have appeared in all of the other Motherships already. So I already have something at which I could create something similar to what the Utopian palette could provide. While I do really love the way that Pat's pigments and shadows perform, I can seek this elsewhere. So I have a pretty big Clionadh Cosmetics collection. And I'm not saying that these are the be-all, end-all, but what I'm saying is that they sell single, very pretty multi-chromes and duochromes. And while Pat is trying to make you spend $125, where I could just go to Clionadh Cosmetics and buy like that one special shade because that's the shade that I want. And now that I'm on this no buy and like trying to be a little more critical of the makeup that I do purchase, I'd be more inclined, like I would be more inclined and tell other people to seek something like this out, because $25 is definitely a lot for a single shadow. But when you're getting these multi-chromes and you're getting the exact shade you want instead of paying $125 for 10 shades just to get the one shade. My angle on these is a lot different than what I see in the monitor, but this one right here is purple with a green shift. And that looks very similar to me to this very, like the shade that Pat has. I don't know what the shade is called, but it is a duochrome, a multi-chrome that I have already on hand, and it looks very similar to that purple. But there's also other purples in the Clionadh collection that I could get instead. And essentially, I could just do whatever I wanted and get a purple maybe that suits me even more than the Pat McGrath one. And because there are so many options through Clionadh Cosmetics, I could buy the one that I want the most. Or maybe I'll find another duochrome color that I also am like, I'm even more inspired by, and I could just have that one very special shade. So I think like Pat is like kind of missing the opportunity here to, she did try selling singles and they didn't go over very well because they were expensive. They were $25 per single shadow. But I think if she was selling these pigments, which she's never sold in singles, if she was selling the baked pigments as singles, I think people would buy them and they would like that a lot more rather than thinking about having to spend $125 on an eyeshadow palette. And the thing is, I was just talking about this in my new makeup nonsense bingo. I don't know which one of these videos is going up first, but if that's already live, I will link it up in the cards. I was talking about during that video how brands are not being thoughtful to the consumer right now, and I understand that doesn't make any sense. Why would they cater to us? Well, again, I think the problem is they want to make money off of us, but no one's listening to us. And so I don't think their sales are as high, but also that could be due to the pandemic and people not having money, etc. There are like a number of reasons as to why people might not buy them. However, get us to spend our money, specifically for us to spend over $100 on something, what it needs to be is very special, and then the Utopian palette just isn't very special overall, because you remove that purple shade and what you have is a very boring palette. And it's beautiful, but still boring. I did come up with a solution as to how to make this more sellable, or what could have been a better thought. So, Pat McGrath does a number of different sizes of palettes. So she does release quads. However, this quad and this quad are not created equal. This is from the first time she did quads in this packaging. These are all that like baked pigment, those very special shades that show up on the far right side of the palette. And that's what she did with the holiday collection. All of the palettes just were these pigments, and it was beautiful. And they were a little more expensive than the quads are now, but I think these are worth it because then you're only getting those special shades, and the special shades, in my opinion, are the reason to buy the Mothership palettes, because those are the ones that have the high impact. They're very special looking. Like they do create, like they like make your eyes look so good. So like these are the things that I really want. But then there's also the quads that I think it wasn't this past holiday, but maybe 2 holidays ago, where these are just eyeshadows. These don't have the pressed pigment in them. And while this is very pretty, and like the shades of it are very pretty, nothing about this is as special as what I just showed you in the other palette. And hopefully when I hold these up, you can see the difference. Just obviously in color, obviously this one is definitely much more colorful, but you can see that these ones reflect light just a lot differently than these ones do, because these ones are just plain shimmer eyeshadows. And so like they're not built the same. So what Pat could have done with this color story is released the pigments as a quad, which I think would have gone over very well, because I think the pigments are all beautiful. And then it's not $125. And then I think you would get more people buying something this sized with those, because 3 of the 4 pigments are very pretty, but also very wearable. And then you have that purple, which again has the intrigue. I think all of those could go into one of these, and it would be very well received, and people would buy it because they want that purple shade, but then they will also use the other shades a lot more. Or what Pat could have done is when you take the entire 10 pans, the 4 on the far left are pretty normal looking shades, and I think those would have made a very pretty quad. A very boring quad, but if that's what you were going for, it would be very good to sell it in this kind of format, because I think it would sell very well because it's neutral, and I think people would really like it. It would just sell because of the colors that are there. It would make it more accessible to people because it wouldn't be $125. Again, like these are $58, I believe, at full price. So like $58 is still steep for 4 eyeshadows just for a quad, but it's definitely not as scary as spending $125. And I think people, just to get the shades they want, would rather spend it on this as opposed to buying the 10 pan palette and getting shades that they're not going to use. And then if they made those 4 on the far left a quad, you could take the remaining 6 and make one of these smaller palettes. Now, don't put it in this packaging because this packaging sucks, but this is a great 6-pan little eyeshadow palette. And I think that the purple and like all of the special shades plus the 2 mattes or the 2 not special shades in it would work very well as a 6-piece. That would be very interesting, because there is one like orangey shimmer in there that's very pretty that I think I would like to have that shade. I don't know that I have a shade like that in my collection as it is, but like I think this would be much more accessible to people, like a 6-pan. I believe these eyeshadows were $65 at full price, and that's just a much more manageable price range too. Like I don't think that this palette needed to be a Mothership palette, because when I look at the color story, I was like, these are not interesting enough to put together and be like, this is worth $125. I'm gonna come to my final thoughts now. So if I wasn't on my no-buy, if I didn't instill this no-buy, would I have bought this palette? Maybe, because I would have still been so sucked up in the allure of owning a Pat McGrath palette and like finishing my collection. But unfortunately, I think I will not buy this palette on the other side of my no-buy, which is like good, and also like feels a little bit weird to me because I have been such a collector and such a cheerleader of Pat McGrath and the brand, and like Pat McGrath Labs, the brand. And also, I'm always rooting for Pat McGrath, the person, as well. That just feels a little odd that I'm not going to have this in my collection. There was a beat where I was like, well, after my no-buy, I obviously have to buy this. But I don't. And I don't need it. And like, that's okay. And I think thinking about it critically like this has really pointed it out to me. And I was like, if it was a quad, I probably would buy the quad. If it was a 6-pan palette, I probably would buy the 6-pan palette. But as a Mothership, this palette is just not special enough for us to buy. Now, a lot of people thought this was going to be some kind of like beautiful shimmery rainbow palette. And if that was it, and all 10 of those were like the pigment shades, and they were all like beautiful transformative shades that like were multi-chromes or duochromes or like multi-chrome toppers, that's a different conversation. That would be worth the $125 because there would be so much in it that would be like you would like want all of that in your collection. But like right now I have all the golds and like the gold pink shifts and the gold purple shifts, and do you know what I mean? Like I have that all in my collection already, and there's nothing about this palette that like brings them together in a way that makes it different from what I already have. And I could pull from other things in my collection, and I'm going to be inclined to pull from other things in my collection as opposed to buying this Utopian palette. Okay, I think I've ranted enough about this palette, and I hope my points come across clear. I'm sure when I'm editing, I'm gonna be like, what the fuck was I talking about? But you know, it is what it is. I appreciate you so much for watching. If you made it to the end of my video, please give me a like and consider subscribing if you want to see someone using their collection and trying to love their collection as it is. And I do have a lot of beautiful luxury products if like that's why you came to my video and we're curious about luxury. I do talk about luxury quite a bit on my channel, and I do think luxury we should be more critical of it because it costs more. So just know that. If you haven't voted for me already, please click that link in the description box below. I would love for you to vote for me, and I will see you in my next video. Friends.